I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, the Food and Drug Administration's Advisory Committee greenlighting Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, clearing the way for the agency's leaders to authorize emergency mass distribution amid an ongoing surge of virus cases across the nation. But how long will a return to normalcy take? Fox Business anchor Liz Claman discusses the timeline for businesses in the U.S. to recover from the pandemic and what she says lawmakers in Washington should do to support struggling industries. And while the election was over a month ago, Americans remain divided over the results. Nearly 75% of Republicans in a recent poll say they do not accept President Trump's defeat. Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace weighs in on the Trump administration's election legal challenges and whether he thinks Americans will agree on taking a coronavirus vaccine. Plus commentary from Jimmy Fallon, host of Fox Across America. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Jerry Willis.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Shannon Bream, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, December 11th, 2020. I'm Lisa Brady. A COVID vaccine clears a major hurdle, and it may be the way out of the pandemic. But there will be scars on the U.S. economy.
Even more upsetting is all the small businesses you've never heard of. They don't have the big names, and they are not coming back.
I'm Chris Foster. The election's been over for weeks, and as President Trump and his supporters keep fighting the results, Americans seem as politically divided as ever.
Look, I'm not sure anybody can bring the country back together again.
We talked to Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace.
And I'm Jimmy Fallon. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
The vote was overwhelming. A panel of FDA advisors recommending approval of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S. 17-4 with one abstention Thursday evening after a day-long hearing.
And that concludes the vote. So we do have a favorable vote.
The final decision is up to career staff at the FDA, which is widely expected to follow the recommendation. Britain was first to use the vaccine, with only a few issues reported in this week's UK rollout. People who had an allergic reaction.
What we were told from the UK is these were two individuals who were very hypersensitive, hyperallergic, the kind of person that needs to go around with an EpiPen.
White House Task Force member Admiral Brett Giroir telling Fox News that data will be studied and could prompt an advisory for certain people to defer getting the shot for now. As the FDA weighs emergency authorization, COVID cases continue to set records across the U.S. On Wednesday, over 3,100 deaths, more than on 9/11 or D-Day in World War II. On Thursday, the nationwide total passing 290,000 lives lost and climbing. The virus has also killed tens of thousands of businesses.
110,000 American restaurants have already permanently shut their doors.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says about 1 in 5 small businesses have shut down. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi agrees the need for help is urgent and wants a deal before Christmas week when enhanced unemployment benefits expire.
Now, if we need more time, then we take more time. But we have to have a bill, and we cannot go home without it.
But for now, a months-long debate over another COVID relief bill continues. In the meantime, though, Wall Street has also been setting records, new highs fueled in large part by light at the end of the tunnel, the hope for vaccine success.
They say that the market usually runs about 6 months ahead of the economy or news that's happening. So the optimism is very much entrenched at the moment.
Liz Claman is host of the Claman Countdown on Fox Business and the Everyone Talks to Liz podcast.
I mean, we have had multiple records over the past couple of days, depending on the day. And it just appears to me that Wall Street looks at these numbers when it comes to the vaccine. They know it's there. They know it's a matter of time. Canada and the United Kingdom are already distributing it. And therefore, they think, well, let's run ahead about 6 months when lots of people hopefully will have been vaccinated.
That's a key question, though, because it seems like a significant percentage of Americans might not be ready to get vaccinated. How big a concern is that, especially for businesses?
It's a very big concern. Last numbers I saw, 60% say they'll take it. 40% are still on the fence about it. And some of those people are actually first responders, maybe firefighters, police officers. I think that once they see that there is a wave and the positive aspects that come out of that wave regarding the economy, all roads lead to people's wallets and, of course, their hearts. I mean, we've lost so many people over this. Do you really want to take that chance and lose more?
It's really stunning, given how many months it's gone on and how new and bleak it was back in March when things really shut down at the beginning. What's it going to take for the economy to fully recover from this? I mean, is it equal parts everything being open and people being comfortable going into all those places? Or is there something more incremental that needs to happen?
That's an excellent question. The easy answer would be when everybody gets vaccinated, not necessarily. I would put it like this, and there are people who would completely disagree with me, but I am keeping my eye on two sectors, the arts and restaurant chains. When you see them come back, when they are fully allowed to reopen indoor and outdoor dining, that's for the restaurants, and people actually go, you will see a revitalization. And it's interesting that I bring up the arts because a lot of people roll their eyes and say, wasn't that sort of squishy? No. The arts means movie theaters, live venues, arenas, Broadway, theaters all over the place. You know that anything arts related with the music industry, movies, television, theater equals about 4.5% of GDP in this country. 4.5%, that's more than transportation, that's more than agriculture. So once those come back, to me, that will be the signal that the economy truly is coming back, because all those people who've been laid off, 1 million in the arts community, close to 1 million, or maybe even more in the restaurant industry, once they're rehired, then you can start to breathe a little easier.
I know you interviewed the CEO of Airbnb on the Claman Countdown as they were making their NASDAQ debut, and he seemed to have an optimistic outlook, despite having taken a really big hit from the pandemic shutdowns.
This company was born in a crisis, in the crisis of 2008, and, we couldn't afford to pay our rent. And I think that, you have to have optimism. Even in your darkest days, you have to believe that things will eventually get better, that these are moments in time.
Airbnb just endured a near-death experience. When you lose 80% of your customers in one day, collapse, you don't survive that. He managed to survive. In fact, Brian Chesky said, few people have survived and lived to tell losing 80% of their business, their customers. But here's what they found. They found that you immediately start plugging the holes. You do what you have to do, and some of that is painful. They had to lay off 1,900 or 25% of their employees, just to save the business so that one day down the road, they would be able to hire them back. And then they started to see the silver lining effect, and that was that if people were going to work from home, they realized they could work from anywhere. And if you're going to work from anywhere, heck, instead of being stuck in a little one-bedroom walk-up on the Lower East Side, why not go to a yurt in Indonesia or go to Canada and sit in a cabin and look at Vancouver Bay? I mean, there's so many things that you could do, and that was socially distanced opportunity for him, and he started to see that. So yeah, that was an interesting business case, and at some point that will be a Harvard Business School case study of how they survived this.
Very interesting. I mean, contrast that with a company like DoorDash, which also started trading this week. They did very well with a spike in food delivery during the pandemic. So they're one of the companies that sort of had a silver lining in the middle of it. But could they suffer a setback when things go back to quote unquote normal or whatever that is?
DoorDash and DoorDash Bowls are probably banking on a new normal. And they're thinking nobody will ever go out again, or they will severely attenuate how many times they go to a restaurant, and therefore their business will be awesome. Here's the thing about DoorDash, and who knows? I think it's a phenomenal business. It works very, very well. However, if ever they were going to have the best year ever, this is it. People were locked down. So they had to find a way to get delivery. DoorDash emerges as this, this incredible moment, the sun bursting out, we're here to save you. And they kept people employed. They're very smart. They've struck a lot of relationships with restaurants, and now they're striking relationships with pharmacies and big box retailers saying, we're not just going to DoorDash or deliver food. We can deliver a lipstick if somebody's desperate. Spoken like a true, television news anchor who sometimes is desperate for a lipstick to be delivered. But seriously, I think that they'll do okay. I just think that that's a big question mark hanging over them.
Mm-hmm. What other industries saw a boom from this and could suffer when it ends? I feel like there's a lot of sort of question marks hovering out there.
Well, let me give you one that won't suffer. I think a new normal definitely has bestowed a lot of shining light on telemedicine. I think telemedicine is a business that people were suspicious of in the past. Wait, the doctor can't really see the rash that I have. Telemedicine is brilliant and it works. And my goodness, I used it just to get approval to get a vaccine. And I can tell you, I was so impressed. I think that's a business that will do very well after the pandemic. I am very worried about commercial real estate. Commercial real estate has gotten hammered because people worked from home, and then companies realized, wait. Why are we spending all this money to rent 22 floors in Midtown Manhattan, downtown LA, San Francisco, when a good portion of these employees are doing as good a job and they're actually happier with that work-life balance and working from home? Maybe we can cut that down to 10 floors or 4 floors. I think that is going to be a question that is a big overhang for commercial real estate. Now, the malls are interesting. The malls figured out quickly, what are we going to do? They immediately started opening up some of their empty space to Amazon. Amazon started taking empty anchor stores like JCPenney in these malls and turning them into the warehouse distribution areas for them. They got a discount. I mean, listen, there's nothing like striking a deal when nobody wants the product. This is brilliant. So I think that if you're malleable and you are quick on your feet and you bend so you don't break, those are industries that will stay alive.
Do we have any more of a sense now about whether all of this working from home is likely to continue, or does it become more likely the longer it goes on?
I don't know. I miss being in the office. I don't love the commute of going to the office, but I'd like to go back for the simple reason of working face-to-face with my team. And I think Zoom has saved us, obviously, but if you are somebody who loves collaboration, it's much easier to do it spitballing in a room with a whiteboard, and you get to all do it and you're there, and then you can run into somebody's office. There are other industries, though, that will be just fine where the people have decided, you know what, we could work from home. But when you tick off all of the big names, Gold's Gym, Friendly's, J. Crew, Neiman Marcus, True Religion Jeans, Pier 1, Cirque du Soleil, they all filed for bankruptcy. That doesn't mean that they'll disappear forever because, you can do bankruptcy protection and reorganization, et cetera. But consumer demand just dropped off for them. And that's extraordinarily sad. But even more upsetting is all the small businesses you've never heard of. They don't have the big names, and they are not coming back. When they go under, it's just a Leviathan effort to reopen. And that will be a scar that takes a long time to disappear on this economy.
But the COVID relief bill that they're still talking about in Congress, I mean, is it too late for that to, help businesses significantly while they wait for the vaccine?
Not too late. It's a disgrace that it hasn't come yet. It's a disgrace that we are waiting up to the deadline before Congress gets up and leaves to go home so they can quarantine and then have their holiday family events. This is really important. This is their job to pass this thing. There is that bipartisan bill. Why not? Just go for it. Cut with the politics. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the passage. I just find it really, really distressing that they're still arguing over this as people literally lose their jobs and close their businesses day after day after day.
Liz Claman, host of the Claman Countdown, thank you very much for your time.
This is Jimmy Fallon with your Fox News commentary coming up.
The presidential inauguration's in 40 days. President Trump says he should be the one standing there being sworn in for a second term, saying Monday during a Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony.
You look at the different states, the election was totally rigged. It's a disgrace to our country. It's like a third world country. These ballots pouring in from everywhere using machinery that nobody knows ownership, nobody knows anything about. They have glitches, as they call them, glitches. The glitches weren't glitches. They got caught sending out thousands of votes, all against me, by the way.
And polls show a majority of Republicans say they do not accept that Joe Biden really won. He ran as the candidate to bring America together.
You know, you've gotten President Trump refusing to acknowledge that he won and continuing these lawsuits and pressuring the state legislators and pressuring members of Congress.
Chris Wallace is the host of Fox News Sunday.
Had this run like a normal transition with the president inviting the president-elect in and inviting members to the Oval Office, starting the transition and letting Biden team members go into the various agencies, we'd have a different feeling. I will say Biden has made some choices in the cabinet that I think are going to be pretty difficult to get through, and that certainly doesn't add to that. I mean, the choice of Neera Tanden to be the budget director, Lloyd Austin, General Austin, a distinguished military person, former retired, but you're going to have a waiver again, and there's going to be a big argument about that. Look, I'm not sure anybody can bring the country back together again. I mean, we're so polarized, and you can see it with Biden's appointments. Some of them are getting, literally, Neera Tanden, who I'm sure most people don't know, she was the head of the Center for American Progress, a liberal think tank. She's getting hammered both by the right and the left. From the right that she's too liberal, from the left that she's too much too tied to big corporate interests. So, it's awfully hard for anybody to bring this country together these days.
I mean, this is still very, very much Donald Trump's Republican Party. I mean, if you, as a Republican, question or deny that the election was rigged, you're risking your political life.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why so many people that privately in Congress will say to you, well, of course the election's over, and of course this delayed transition and the president's refusal to acknowledge the election and the continued lawsuits are bad for democracy. We'll say that in private. They won't say it in public because at this point, unless you're Mitt Romney or somebody who's out there and so clearly on the record as not being in the Trump camp, you can't risk this. I mean, go ask Bob Corker or Jeff Flake about what taking on this president does to your political future. The answer is you don't have any.
Do you think that influence will last from the sidelines with his social media, whatever other media he gets involved with, not to mention the potential of another run in 2024?
Well, I think that at least initially that, and I've talked to some people who are thinking of running for president in 2024, it freezes the field. There is nobody, and you can talk about from Mike Pence to Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Nikki Haley. Nobody is going to come out as early as they might have if the president were acting differently and say, of course I'm thinking about 2024 because, again, to do that, it's not only that you antagonize President Trump and run the risk of some mean tweets, you also antagonize the millions of people that consider themselves part of the Trump base.
Right.
And, whether or not Trump actually runs in 2024, I don't know. He doesn't know. A lot happens in 4 years. Right now, that's not a fight you want to take on.
Hunter Biden's back in the news, the president-elect's son, under federal investigation for some financial stuff. That's not what Joe Biden wants to be taking up bandwidth as he tries to bring Americans on board.
No. And, one of the things that's interesting, and I think you're going to see, the mainstream media maybe pay a little bit of a price for this. They didn't cover. Some would say they covered up, but they certainly didn't cover the allegations against Joe Biden in the fall, before the election. And I think that they deserved at least some coverage. Do I think that there was some over coverage? Absolutely. But I think it deserved some coverage, and in some places it seemed like it got none at all. So for people who were just relying on those news sources, this story came out of nowhere, that suddenly Joe Biden has these foreign business dealings, and it's under investigation, and there's been a grand jury impaneled, and the U.S. attorney in Delaware. We don't know. I mean, all of that is a long way away from a charge, from an indictment. And some people are now rushing to say, well, and how does this implicate the president-elect? There's no indication so far that he's either a subject or a target, the president-elect, of this investigation. So, we have to wait and see. But clearly this is a news story, and I think a lot of people were ill-served because this is the first they've heard about this news story.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, like you said, an actual grand jury. This isn't, a laptop with some. This isn't as murky as the stuff we got in the fall. Now, no, the fact that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware formally notified, if you believe Hunter Biden, he's the one who actually announced it. Formally notified Biden that they are investigating him. He's either the subject or the target of an investigation. So that's legit at this point. Doesn't mean he's going to be charged, but it's a legitimate news story. By this time next week, some coronavirus vaccines will probably be in some people's arms. Pretty great. Is a scientific achievement. A quarter of Americans, though, according to some polls, are saying, no thanks, it's not for me. So part of the work, besides the distribution of the vaccine, is going to be convincing enough people to take it.
Absolutely. And my guess is, actually, I've seen numbers as high as 40% of Americans say they either won't or may not take it. I think that changes over time. In other words, there's been a lot of talk about this being tied into politics. Were corners cut? Operation Warp Speed was there a political rush to try to get it approved? You're going to get people that are probably almost 100% going to take it, healthcare workers, people in nursing homes now. And, in a month or two, when we see, one, whether they've gotten immunity, and two, whether there have been any serious side effects, I think a lot of people who are now either on the fence or saying no will change their minds about it. But there's no question that part of this is not the distribution effort is not just going to be getting the vaccine out. It's also going to be public service announcements and, major public figures like former presidents taking the vaccine to say, look, this is safe, it's effective, take it.
Yeah. Layoffs are back to what we had in September. Where does a relief package stand?
Well, we're back over 800,000. Very concerning. This is an economy that's got real problems. It's got real problems from unemployment, real problems from businesses that are just hanging on by their fingernails. The eviction moratorium runs out the end of the year. I mean, we need COVID relief. When we were talking a week ago, it seemed that this Gang of Eight, a bipartisan group, 4 Republican senators, 4 Democratic senators, had come up with something, and they did come up with something. The problem is that, every time you put your foot out there, into the water, dip your toe in the water, somebody wants to chop it off because the Republicans are saying, no, it needs to be less money. The Democrats are saying it needs to be more money. They're arguing about the policy components like liability protection, aid to cities and states. In the bill, the White House is now saying, well, don't give extra unemployment benefits, give a $600 lump sum payment. I don't know. I mean, the need for this seems overwhelming, and Congress's ability to ignore and fail to meet that need seems irresistible. So I don't know how this gets resolved. I sure hope they come up with something.
Yeah, I mean, we see all these stories. Fox has been featuring a lot of restaurant owners, for example, and other business owners who are either protesting or flat out breaking coronavirus restrictions. But there seems to be more protests against shutdowns and restrictions than there are people pushing Congress to help them.
Yeah, well, because you can understand. I mean, getting on TV and saying that they're killing me here by shutting down my business. And, that story in California where a woman has a small restaurant and they're telling her that she has to shut down, and right across the street, they're making a movie and they've set up a tent with the outdoor commissary so that all the people can be fed outdoor dining. It doesn't seem any different than the outdoor dining she was doing. Yeah. That's a pretty strong story. And that obviously has more legs than somebody calling members of Congress and saying, vote for this bill. I'm a very mixed feelings here. On the one hand, I feel terribly, in my local community, we're very close to people who own a restaurant, and they've had to open and shut and open and shut. And, we're very close to these people. And they've spent years building up this business, and they're hanging on by their fingernails. So I feel very upset about it and very empathetic towards them and their plight. And I don't know what the right answer is about what needs to stay open, and the science is changing. Now it appears that, particularly for elementary school, having schools open and letting kids stay in, they're safer there than they are out in the regular world, the outside world. What about indoor dining, outdoor dining? I think we have to tread very lightly, but clearly, the spread of the virus of 200,000 cases, you got to address that as well.
Chris Wallace, host of Fox News Sunday. Thanks a lot. Talk to you next week.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chris.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Former federal prosecutor and 4-term U.S. Congressman from South Carolina brings you a one-of-a-kind podcast. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers.
A Chicago second grader is proof that anyone can make a difference, no matter their age. Haley Orlinsky is 7, and she's spent the better part of the pandemic making bracelets out of rubber bands. And it's not just a hobby. Haley sells the bracelets as a fundraiser to buy personal protective equipment for a children's hospital. So far, it's generated nearly $20,000 for Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital. Her initial goal was $200, which she quickly surpassed, charging $3 a bracelet or $5 for one with a charm added. It started when she heard about PPE shortages during the pandemic, and she was inspired to help. Her mother, children's book author Lori Orlinsky, estimates the effort has created roughly 8,000 bracelets, most of them made by Haley. The fundraiser's been a family project. A 4-year-old sister helps organize the bands by color, and both parents help mail the finished products nationwide. Her high-profile donors include Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and Haley was even recognized by the White Sox at a ball game. Haley's experience in sales isn't just limited to bracelets. She also has sold the most cookies in her Girl Scout troop. She says she's got no immediate plans to stop making bracelets, which means she'll be making a difference for a while to come. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Jimmy Fallon.
What's on your mind?
Sports Illustrated named the activist athlete as its Sports Person of the Year. Now, with all due respect to the outstanding men and women on the list, asking fans to salute woke athletes is the worst business proposition I've ever heard in sports. And I say that as someone who was once offered season tickets to the New York Knicks. To be clear, the Sports Person of the Year is a lot like the McRib, in that it gets a ton of hype when it first comes out, but everybody forgets about it a few days later, perhaps for their own good in the case of the McRib. What sets this year's award apart is that SI is celebrating athletes for what they did off the field instead of what they did on it, ushering in a new era in which batting stances take a backseat to political stances. In theory, it's commendable that athletes want to affect positive change, but in reality, it's killing ratings and the badly needed escapism that sports used to provide us with. Viewership for this year's NBA Finals were down 51% from 2019 because the vast majority of fans, they don't put on a game to solve societal problems. They put it on to get away from them. There was a time when sports represented a form of common culture in this country, a place where people could put their political differences aside for a few hours a night, take in a game, and have a beer. They might even gamble, either with a bookie or by eating the stadium nachos. Those days are long gone, and I take no joy in saying it because this country would greatly benefit from the awesome superpower that pro sports have to unite us in the face of adversity. Think of President George W. Bush throwing out the greatest first pitch in history prior to Game 3 of the 2001 World Series at Yankee Stadium, which of course was just weeks after the September 11th attacks. Nobody cared about politics in that moment. Nobody cared who you voted for when Bush took the mound, because players in that era recognized that while not perfect, America is the greatest source of good the world has ever known. And for that alone, we should be able to unify for 3 hours a night to watch them earn their millions while we blow our thousands on hot dogs and beer. Does anybody on the Sports Person of the Year list honestly believe the country is more unified as a result of their activism this year? If so, you should check them into the concussion protocol program right away. And again, I'm not telling athletes to quit the fight, but I am telling them to move the battlefield. Because the most iconic sports moments in history, the ones that'll stay with you forever, they have two things in common. One is they all have nicknames, like the catch and the shot heard around the world and the miracle on ice. The other is that none of them are political statements. Sports Illustrated will score plenty of points with the social justice crowd for their salute to activism. But if leagues keep running this play, it may lead to another historic sports moment called the Chapter 11. Be sure to check out Fox Across America with me, Jimmy Fela, weekdays from noon to 3 on FoxNewsRadio.com.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network. In these ever-changing times, you can rely on Fox News for hourly updates for the very latest news and information on your time. Listen and download now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.